A few months ago, we explored Black Mountain, where we found Tabitha and the state of Utobitha. At the top of that mountain, we found a ghoul named Raul trapped as a slave mechanic for super mutants. We free Raul from his captivity after going through the saga of Black Mountain, which I recount in depth in my video on the topic, which you can watch here. After saving the ghoul, we have the option to take him on as a companion. But at the time, I was busy shooting footage for videos on other topics, so instead, I sent him to his shack. When we're ready, we can track down Raul at his shack to see if he'll join our company. We find his shack by following the road east from New Vegas. Just head to the New Vegas Medical Clinic and follow the road. We'll likely walk through one NCR or Legionary ambush, but those are all the enemies we'll find. After passing some tall rocks to the left, we can turn north through a field of short cactuses where we find Raul's shack. There's a blasted out Corvega parked just outside, and wandering around by a tree is an itty-bitty malnourished Brahmin calf. There are all sorts of little plants growing outside of his shack. Looks like Raul is a bit of a gardener. We can head on inside, where we find Raul wearing his Petro Chico jumpsuit and living a modest life in his humble home.
Oh, it's you. You need something repaired or something?
Hey, Raul, you want to tag along with me for a while?
Anything's better than staying here. Let's go.
When he joins as a companion, we get the regular maintenance perk, which slows the degradation of our equipment's condition by 50%. This has got to be one of the most useful perks in the game, especially if you don't have the jury-rigging perk and you wear rare armor. Raul is also an exemplary repairman. He has a 100 skill in repair, allowing him to repair any item to full condition. He does charge you caps, but if karma is not one of your concerns, you can always pickpocket the caps back off of him. Now that he's our companion, let's talk with the old ghoul to learn a little bit more about this man's history.
Sure, boss. What do you want to know?
Well, Raul, let's start with the basics. Who exactly are you?
You forget about me already, boss? You sure you didn't take a blow to the head or something? My name is Raul Alfonso Tejada.
Well, then why does your jumpsuit say Miguel?
Probably because it used to be Miguel's.
Oh, okay. Anything else you want to share?
Boss, usually when somebody gives you a name and nothing else, it's because that's all they want to give you.
Right. Looks like we're gonna have to put some work in if we're gonna get anything out of this old ghoul. Raul, I've got a lot of questions about your life.
I'm an open book, boss. Granted, the book's in Spanish and some of the pages have fallen out, but I'm an open book.
Well, why don't you tell me where you're from?
I was born just outside Mexico City. My family had a little ranch there.
Short, sweet, and to the point. Okay, I like it. How about your age? How old are you?
Old enough to know better, boss. Old enough to know better.
I couldn't help but notice the name Petro Chico written on the back of your jumpsuit. What exactly is Petro Chico?
You never heard of Petro Chico? Un amigo de Poseidon Energy. Of course not. They were an oil company in Mexico back before the war.
How did you end up on Black Mountain anyway?
Well, boss, when a giant insane super mutant asks you to stay put, you do what you're told. Well, maybe you don't. But I'm just a broke-down old man.
But how did Tabitha find you in the first place?
It's stupid, boss. I used to listen to the radio broadcast, just to pass the time. Well, one day the signal stopped, so I figured I'd try to find a transmitter. I'm a pretty good repairman. Or I was before my eyes started to go. Anyway, I found Black Mountain and offered my services. But Tabitha decided I was useful enough to keep around. Permanently.
Huh, interesting. All right, well, I have a few more questions.
Questions, boss? You mean you don't know everything there is to know already?
Gosh, this ghoul is sassy. Let me pick your brain about contemporary politics. Can you tell me anything about Mr. House?
Just how old do you think I am, boss? Because I can pretty much guarantee I'm older than that. Let me tell you a story from before the Great War. Everybody knew Robert House. He was a genius, a superstar. Founded Ramco at 22. Dated Hollywood starlets, the works. They say he saved Las Vegas. I was in Mexico City when the bombs dropped. Even from there, we could see House's defensive rockets shooting down the incoming missiles. Everybody assumed he died in the war. Maybe he did. But his robots are still out there roaming the waste. And now, a Mr. House rules New Vegas.
You can't seriously think that they are the same, Mr. House.
Maybe not. Maybe the new guy is just a clever raider chief with knowledge of history. Maybe he just left instructions for his robots to carry out in his name. Or maybe Robert House uploaded his brain pattern into a computer and rules to this day a godless, soulless machine god. Maybe the whole thing's a crazy coincidence. Who knows?
Maybe there's a connection. Can you remember anything about Robert House?
I remember there were some weird stories about him, especially near the end. There was a tell-all in El Periódico de las Arboridas by a starlet House dated. She said they never, don't make me spell it out, boss. Anyway, she said all he wanted to do was scan her brain and make her dress up in different outfits.
What? That's disgusting!
It was quite the scandal, at least in the Latin American tabloid journalism market.
Well, Mr. House has problems with his Johnny-come-lately. You know, they have pills for that in our own universe. I wonder if it's true for theirs. What are your thoughts about the NCR, Raul?
They're all right, I suppose. Had a bit of tough going there at the beginning. You know, their first town was nearly wiped out by raiders. Anyway, they got their good points and their bad. Just like a lot of the old governments from before the war.
Well, how do you feel about Caesar's Legion?
I don't really have a problem with them. People around here tend to see them as invading marauders planning to burn and pillage the countryside. But I've been to Arizona, boss. Before the Legion, it was a nasty place. So thick with raiders you couldn't trade with a town 2 miles up the road. Caesar's laws aren't nice, and their actions aren't always pretty. But then neither am I. But you keep me around.
Tell me about New Vegas.
It's big, it's bright, and it's one of the biggest cities still left from before the war. Well, mostly anyway. Used to be just a curiosity. The buildings were pre-war. But it's just as full of raiders and barbarian tribes as any place else. Then Mr. House took over. Got the power turned back on. And got the tribes reformed into something civilized. And now they run his casinos for him.
Well, you're a fascinating repository of information, Raul. I have to hand it to you. So now that you're going to accompany me, how can I best make use of your skills?
I'm not much use besides being a portable encyclopedia, really. I guess you could use me as a pack Brahmin. But my knees aren't so good anymore.
What? Well, then what use are you to me?
I sort of figured you had your own reasons for keeping me around, boss.
Well, I don't believe that you're useless. You must have some skills.
That's nice of you to say, boss. But I'm an old man. Not much use to anybody anymore. Time was. I was a pretty good shot with a pistol. I guess I'm still half decent. These old bones aren't much use in hand-to-hand fighting, though. I can also do maintenance work on your stuff. I don't have the supplies for a real repair job. But I can keep your gear working longer.
You know, lots of older people are still useful to their friends and communities.
Yeah, maybe you can introduce them to me. If we find them. Because I've never met one.
Well, now, Raul has presented us with an interesting challenge, and it's a challenge I think we can accept. Let's introduce this old ghoul to aged octogenarians who are still useful to their communities. Before we go, we can loot Raul's shack. Now that he's our companion, it doesn't count as stealing to take whatever we want. We find purified water stim packs and a variety of food on top of a sunset sarsaparilla crate to the west. 2 ammo containers next to a work table to the northeast filled with 9mm ammunition. Looks like this guy likes his pistols. And a workbench. The first old-timer we're gonna go visit is Loyal at the Nellis Air Force Base. We all remember good old Loyal, the mechanic of the boomers, the guy responsible for keeping the solar array in working condition. Without him, the boomers don't have power. I did a video on the boomers and Loyal and the quests that he can give us, which you can watch here. We typically find Loyal in one of the hangars, usually the hangar where we see Jack and Janet walking around and where they've got that dissected plane fuselage. Sometimes he likes to hang out in one of the back workrooms, and we can talk with him. Now, if we've completed all of his quests, he doesn't have much to say, but simply talking with him triggers a conversation from Raul.
That's a good thing to see, huh, boss?
We can respond tersely by saying, "Don't waste my time with your reminiscing, Raul."
Whatever you say, boss. I'll just stay back here and be quiet in case you have a sudden flash of brilliance you need to share.
Or we can encourage him to talk by saying, "Hey, what are you talking about?"
That Loyal guy. He's getting up there in years, but he still finds a way to make himself useful to his people. If you ask me, that's better than withering away all alone or holding on to some faded piece of glory from your past.
We can respond 3 ways. We can respond with admiration towards Loyal by saying, Loyal is using his years of knowledge to help his tribe. I think that's a noble goal.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
What's on your mind?
Old history, boss.
Or we can say, at least he knew when to step back and to start to take it easy. A lot of people don't.
Yeah, it beats dying alone in the wasteland because you were too slow.
Is that something you're afraid of?
That fear's always been a part of my life.
Or we can respond with disdain and say, I suppose if you're happy with that kind of life, it's not so bad.
Maybe. But what if you miss the old days sometimes?
Are you talking about something from your own past, Raul?
A memory from a long time ago. I grew up in a place called Hidalgo Ranch, just outside Mexico City. It wasn't much, just a bit of a farm, with a house for 3 generations of Tejadas. I wasn't the best behaved kid. I was quick with my hands, with a pistol or a wrench. And I wasn't afraid to get into fights over it. I never killed anybody, but I had my share of run-ins with the police. Mostly my family kept me in line. This was before the war. We were far enough away from Mexico City when the bombs fell that we missed the worst of it. But things got bad quick. Just a few days after Mexico City was vaporized, refugees started pouring down the road to our ranch. We helped who we could, but there were so many. Eventually, my father started turning people away before we ran out of food. Things got violent. My father and I got our guns, and we drove them off. About 24 men came back in the night after we'd gone to sleep. They set fire to the ranch house and barred the doors from the outside. My whole family was trapped inside. I smelt the smoke, and I got myself and my little sister Rafaela out through a window. But everyone else, my parents, my grandmother, my 2 brothers, and 2 of my sisters, all died. Rafaela and I ran. We were pursued by some of the men who attacked our home, but I was always a good shot. The ones who came after us, I killed. The rest, I left be. I had to take care of Rafaela, not throw my life away on revenge.
My God. Do you blame yourself for this?
Maybe. I don't know. All I know is that for all my skills with a pistol, I couldn't help them. Anyway, that was weighing on my mind. Thanks for letting me get it out in the open, boss.
You can't think it was your fault. No one could stand against a dozen armed men all alone.
I know that, boss. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just getting sentimental in my old age. Anyways, forget it. Just wanted that off my chest.
Or we can be incredibly cruel and respond, anyone stupid enough not to set watch deserves what they got.
Maybe we made a mistake. It was early on. We didn't know just how serious it was out there. But to say they deserved it, what kind of devil are you, boss?
What kind of devil indeed. We really have an option to be a monster with this game. The next old codger we're going to meet is either going to be at Camp McCarran or Camp Forlorn Hope, depending upon how far along in the NCR storyline we've gotten. If we've completed the quests where we destroy the fiends and kill Cook, then Corporal Sterling and the Rangers at McCarran will have moved to Camp Forlorn Hope to help bolster the NCR front lines. The next gent we're going to introduce Raul to is Corporal Sterling, an elderly man who's had a long career with the NCR and has suffered a lot.
Used to be a ranger, one of the first they sent out east back before we took the dam. Observation and reconnaissance. We took the lay of the land, checked out the locals, and kept ourselves inconspicuous. A couple friends of mine were the first to scout the dam. That was back in '73, if I recall. A lot of those rangers are dead now. Vegas always chewed men up. It's just a little more literal nowadays.
Is that why you left the Rangers to join the 1st Recon?
Well, that wasn't really a matter of choice. Got myself caught by legionaries up near Malpay. They had themselves some fun with me. Mangled my hands and feet pretty good. Wasn't much good with the pistol after that. Wasn't gonna be trekking across the waste on any more long scouts either.
How did you manage to escape Malpay?
Caesar's boys figured I wasn't going anywhere after what they'd done to me. So they didn't bother tying me up. I crawled out of there on my elbows and knees. Must have looked a sight. Then I rolled down an embankment into the Colorado. I guess I had a mind to drown rather than give Caesar's boys the satisfaction of killing me. But a couple of rangers happened to be watching from across the river. They jumped on in and pulled me out of there. Lucky break, they said.
After hearing Corporal Sterling's story, Raul wants to chat.
Got a second to talk, boss?
Sure, what's on your mind?
Meeting Corporal Sterling. Well, it kind of got me thinking. Here's a guy that's been beat all to hell, right? I mean, he could have retired from the service, but instead he signs back on and does what he can. You think he did the right thing?
We have 4 ways to respond. We can say, the NCR put a lot of time and money into his training. He owes it to them to use it however he can.
Even if he can't use it anymore? Isn't that like asking you to come up with one of your brilliant schemes after suffering a crippling head wound? Oh, another one, I mean?
Why do I get the impression this is more personal to you?
I guess it reminds me of my own life.
Or we can say, it might seem harsh, but a soldier can't do his job properly with those kind of limitations.
You're preaching to the choir here, boss. Once a man's prime is behind him, he should let it go.
Sounds like maybe you're talking about yourself there, Raul.
It's a question I've asked myself often enough.
Or we can be cruel and say, with those injuries, he's nothing but a drain on resources. He should retire.
That's what I love about you, boss. The pity you show for the less fortunate than you.
Why do you care so much anyways?
He reminds me of me in some ways.
Or we can say, I think it's good that he's so devoted to his duty. More people should act that way.
You think so, boss? Because I remember a time when a lot of people stuck to their duty no matter what. It ended with nuclear bombs falling on my hometown.
You're talking about the Great War? What do you remember about it?
After the fire, I knew my sister and I couldn't stay at Hidalgo Ranch anymore. The refugees still wanted me dead. They even put a bounty on me. I remember how scared Rafaela was. I told her if she came with me, we'd see the vaqueros. She used to love the rodeo, especially the trick riders. We figured maybe we could find help in Mexico City. We were young. We didn't know what had happened, really. We didn't understand about the bombs.
Wasn't Mexico City basically annihilated in the Great War?
I don't think it was as hard hit as D.C. or Bakersfield. But it was bad enough. By the time we got there, the city was a radioactive ruin. Still, the city was full of looters, already forming into the beginnings of raider tribes. Crime was bad before the war, but now it was a nightmare. We were living like scavengers, scraping by on what little food we could find, always looking for medicine for my burns. And then, of course, the radiation started to kick in, turning me into this handsome devil you see before you.
Sounds pretty bad.
You're a poet of understatement, boss. But there were moments it was almost worth it. I still remember finding that novelty costume shop. I was just looking around for something I could slice up to wrap my burns when I saw the vaquero outfit hanging on the rack like it hadn't been touched. I took it, not like anybody else needed it, you know, and wore it back to our camp. Rafaela laughed. For the first time since the bombs had fallen.
A vaquero outfit? Wait, wasn't it dangerous to be dressed so noticeably?
It was. I started to build up a legend. Sometimes it headed off trouble, but most of the times it just started more. Young punks looking to prove themselves would come looking for me, but my eyes were sharp and my guns were quick. For a while, it seemed like we might even survive there, until Rafaela.
Oh no. What happened to Rafaela?
She went out to find some food one day. I was sick, so I stayed at our camp. I guess it must have been the beginning of radiation poisoning. Anyway, it was supposed to be safe, but some raiders happened to pass through where she was scavenging. I won't speak of what they did to her. When I found her body, the only way to recognize her was this funny little scar on her knee from when she was a little girl.
That's terrible, Raul.
Terrible doesn't begin to cover it, boss. I let my whole family down. First the ranch, now Rafaela. I was the last Tejada. I guess maybe I went a little crazy then. I took my guns and went back to that market. I didn't have many bullets, but I had enough. After the raiders were dead, I salvaged what I could from the store. I was tired. I just wanted to be alone forever.
So what did you do?
I left Mexico City behind. I made my way out to the Gulf Coast. Eventually, I found an old Petro Chico refinery nobody had claimed. I stayed there for a little while, and I thought a lot about my life. I thought about the guns I'd lived by and what they'd gotten me. I decided my guns hadn't gotten me anything, and it was time to give it up. I took off the old vaquero outfit and put on a Petro Chico jumpsuit. The name tag said Miguel, so I started using the name myself. Eventually, I made it to Arizona. That's another story, boss.
Oh man, this poor guy. It's no wonder, though, that being over 200 years old, he's got so many stories like this. But it all happened so early in his history. I think I begin to see why he doubts his own abilities so much. So far, he's been able to use his talents for revenge, but he hasn't been able to stop any of these atrocities. He hasn't been able to bring his loved ones back. We have one final geriatric to meet, which brings us to Novak. As we enter the old motel, we see two little shacks that still have the light on. We find Ranger Andy in the middle shack. He is asleep and we see his crutches leaning against the wall to the left, but I'm sure he won't mind it if we wake him up a bit. After chatting with the man, we learn that he's a proud member of the NCR.
Was with them. That was back when my arm and leg used to work better.
Oh, well, did you do something to your legs?
Yeah, twice. Actually, the first time it was more like half my body. Knocked me out of the Rangers. This time, it's mostly just reminded me how useless I've gotten.
What did you do?
A few years back, we get a tip that some Legion slavers were holed up in this burnt-out house a few clicks from where we were stationed. We get there and it's deserted. No sign anyone's been there. I mean, nothing. As we're leaving, I hear something behind me. I turn around and there's this kid, just skin and bone, and he's looking up at us and he's scared half to death. Been hiding in a closet. I go to grab him out of there and I notice he's holding something in his hand. Something metal. He shuts himself back in the closet and that's when I see the grenade he's left by my feet. They do it a lot, the Legion, using kids. They know we'll hesitate. Anyway, that was the first time. Second time I fell down those stairs in front of the motel, just in case I got to thinking I'd put it all behind me.
As soon as Raul hears about Ranger Andy's sad state of affairs, he takes us aside.
What do you think of guys like Ranger Andy?
Raul has the same response if we choose any of the three bottom options. He says that we misunderstand him. So instead we can say, what do you mean, guys like Ranger Andy?
I mean guys who have a world of experience doing what they do, but have to give it up because they're getting old and slow or too injured.
Our choice of these four options affects a big life decision that Raul makes, giving us different end-of-game slides. We can choose the tough option and say, even after a crippling injury, a guy like Andy is tougher and more dangerous than most men alive.
Maybe, yeah. I guess you got a point there.
We're not just talking about Ranger Andy, are we?
Not really, boss. No.
Or we can choose the judgmental option and say, he's just scared he doesn't have what it takes anymore.
Maybe, but what if he really doesn't have it?
Are you talking about Andy or yourself?
A little bit of both, I guess.
Or we can choose the dismissive option and say, I think it's good that he's retired. Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. Guys like us can't compete anymore.
Guys like us?
Did I say us? I meant him. Guess my eyesight isn't the only thing that's going.
And finally, we can choose the compassionate response and say just because someone's crippled doesn't mean they're useless. All that experience is invaluable.
Yeah, I suppose you could still teach. Take a less active role in the world. That's not so bad.
Is that what you did?
Would it surprise you to know that I used to be a gunslinging adventurer? I left everything when I left Mexico. My home, my family, my name, even my face. I know it's surprising, boss. But I wasn't always just handsome. As far as the world knows, I was Miguel. And I was okay with that. I headed north for a while, and ended up in Tucson. Not Tucson, by the way. Things were good there. Well, maybe not good, but better than Mexico City anyways. I found myself a little shack, started fixing things.
Fixing things?
Oh, sure, boss. I was always good at fixing things. Some I fixed for the town, some I fixed for other people, some I fixed just for the hell of it. It's a better way to use your hands than killing. And even then, I wasn't getting any younger or faster. I lived there for a long time, kept to myself, didn't get into any fights. Hell, the only reason I even kept my guns oiled was professional pride.
Why aren't you still there then?
Getting there, boss. I'd been in Tucson. The locals can call it Tucson all they want, but it's Tucson, damn it. About 75 years when she showed up. Prettiest thing you ever saw, boss. Maybe it was just a trick of my senile brain, but I swear she looked just like my Rafaela. Her name was Claudia. She ended up taking work at one of the brothels in town. I never went to her, of course. How could I? But I looked after her in my own way.
Oh, what happened with her?
This was a long time ago, before Caesar's Legion pacified Arizona and brought the raider tribes to heel. A tribe came into Tucson one day. More a gang, really. Dirty Dave and his 6 brothers. They were looking for bullets, and I sold some to them. I figured if I did that, they'd leave town before they tore it up too much.
But they didn't, did they?
No, boss. No, they didn't. As I was saying, I hoped they'd leave the town in peace. Instead, they decided to stop at Claudia's brothel to take the edge off. I don't know which one of them got rowdy first, but by the time I heard the screams and got my guns, it was too late. They shot up the brothel, killed 4 girls, and taken Claudia for their sport.
Did you rescue her?
I went after Dave and his brothers. They had a head start, but they slept nights. I didn't. Took me 3 days to catch up to them. Claudia was dead when I got there. They put a bullet in each of her eyes. I couldn't do anything except avenge her, just like Rafaela. I charged into the middle of their camp and started firing. 2 of them were dead before they knew I was there. The other 5, though, they shot the shit out of me. I would have died, I think, if I wasn't so full of rage.
How did you survive?
By being a meaner old cuss than the rest of them, boss. I wanted to keep living until they weren't. So I just kept shooting until they were all dead. I was in pretty bad shape in the end, though. I don't know how long I laid there, with the sun baking me and the buzzards chomping at me. Eventually, I got the strength to start moving. Some long time after that, I managed to drag my carcass back to town. When I recovered, more or less anyways, I left Tucson and headed west. I ran into Tabitha at Black Mountain, and well, the rest you know. I swore I was done with the gunslinging life. I was too old, too slow, and too beat up to protect anyone anymore. I thought I was done forever, but after traveling with you, I realized I've always had my doubts.
Now, the following dialogue is different depending upon the choices we made at the beginning of this conversation. If we chose any of the options except for the tough one, which is the first one, we get the following response when we say, "You had doubts? About what?"
About whether I'm really too old to keep living the life of a gunslinger after all. And after seeing what you go through, boss, I think I am. From now on, I'll let you deal with the fighting and stick to keeping your gear working. I don't want to slow you down more than I already do.
If that's what you think is best, Raul, I won't stop you.
Thanks, boss. I'd hate to think I was disappointing you with my life-altering decision.
With that, Raul's companion perk regular maintenance is upgraded to full maintenance. Now our weapon and armor condition degrades 75% more slowly. And Raul gets a new outfit. It looks a lot like his regular Miguel repairman outfit, but it's armored. He now has a shoulder pad, a utility belt around his sash, and a holster on his leg. However, if we try to trade with him, we don't see it on his inventory. So unlike some of the other companions, we can't take his costume for ourselves. Alternatively, if we chose the tough option at the very beginning of this conversation, the first one, he has the following response when we say, "You had your doubts? About what?"
About whether I still had what it took to carry my pistols proudly, to use them to do what's right. And now that I've been traveling with you for a while, you made me realize that I can still do that. Maybe I'm not as tough as I used to be, but my brains can make up for that. And my hands are still quick enough. It's time to put the guns back on.
I think that's a great idea, Raul, and I hope you put them to good use.
You can bet on that, boss.
With that, Raul gets the Old Vaquero perk, which increases his rate of fire with revolvers and lever-action firearms by 33%. He also gets a brand new costume, which is absolutely fantastic. This must be that same costume he told us about in one of our earlier conversations. That costume he saw in the store window in Mexico City. The one that made his sister Rafaela laugh. It is exquisite. He's got a feather in his hat, a knife in his belt, rounds of ammunition going all the way around his belt, and he wears a bolo tie. Like the previous outfit, we can't loot this from his inventory. However, if he does get the Valero outfit, his old Miguel jumpsuit appears in his inventory, and we can go ahead and loot it and use it if we want to. It just grants +5 to repair. Now, if we feel that the reward we get doesn't match the dialogue choices that we made with Raul, we always have the option to pass a 66 speech check to convince him to change his mind. If he decides to become a full-time repairman and put his pistols behind him because he says he's not good with them, we can pass a speech check to say, "That's not true, Raul. You're great with a pistol."
You think so? Well, you're the boss. Okay, I'll give it a try. But if I get killed, and if there's an afterlife, I'll haunt your ass.
And he gets the old Vaquero perk and the Vaquero outfit. But if he chose to become the old Vaquero again, we can always pass a speech check to say, "I don't think that's such a good idea. You should focus on your mechanical skills instead."
I suppose you're right, boss. These bones are too old for that kind of action.
And we get the full maintenance perk. Raul has self-deprecating humor, constantly picking on himself for either being old or being a ghoul.
Any closer and you'd need a rat away, boss. Don't worry, boss. With my cataracts, you only sort of look like the bad guys. This crouch walking is hell on my back, boss.
It appears that bigotry against ghouls is alive and well in the Mojave Wasteland.
They let ghouls into the strip now?
I've never seen a ghoul up close. Not sure I wanted to.
Oh, good. Now I have to put up with the stench of rotting ghoul as well. I hope the air filters are working.
Except for in Gomorrah. Everyone's all business there.
Your ghoul wants to have some fun, he can. We don't discriminate.
I haven't had a ghoul before. Do I get to keep the tip?
And he's continually but lovably sarcastic at the courier's expense.
Hey, I'm one of you. Don't eat me. Eat the smooth skin. Oh, sorry, boss.
The only other dialogue we get with Raul is flavor dialogue when interacting with him. Sometimes he'll comment on the fiends.
Never been a big fan of gangs like the Fiends, boss. I'm glad they're gone.
And this makes a lot of sense considering his backstory. After what the raiders in Mexico City did to his family, it's no wonder that he's not a fan of big raider gangs.
I'm sure pissing off a ruthless warlord with a tribe of fanatically devoted warriors was a good move. How could it not be? It was your idea.
Here I think he's not talking about the Fiends, but instead talking about the Legion. After all, we killed Motor Runner, the leader of the Fiends, so who else could he be talking about? I think this comes less from a place of sympathy with the Legion and more of a place of practicality. He's had run-ins with warlords and crime bosses in the past, and he knows what happens when you run into them. I think it makes sense that he doesn't think it's very wise making enemies with Caesar. He has more tolerance towards Caesar and the Legion than many of the other companions, as we learned when we asked him about the Legion earlier. He said that at least the Legion makes the roads safe, and they pacified Arizona, getting rid of or absorbing many of the warring tribal gangs. Raul sees this as a good thing, which of course he would, because he's been personally touched by gang warfare. So he sees any kind of stability in the region, even if it comes from the Legion, as a move in the right direction. Though I wonder if his tune would change if the Legion ever wanted something from him. This is a tragic side story, but it lifts the hood to a human condition that is often overlooked in games like this, and that's what happens to people when they age. Sure, some people age well, surrounded by friends and family, people who love them, or surrounded by employees or underlings who respect and revere them. Some people grow old and become the wise tribal leader, and some people grow old to become the sly, ruthless mob boss. But the vast majority of people in the wasteland don't become revered leaders or mob bosses. Instead, they find it harder to do the things that they used to do so easily. They begin to become overlooked by the people around them. They can wander the streets of New Vegas without anyone noticing them, almost as if they're becoming invisible. This is a story about those kind of people and how they deal with their changing situation over time. Raul was certainly in that place, but of course his situation is different. he's a ghoul. And this brings up a few questions about the nature of ghouls. After all, he tells us that he started to feel himself become a ghoul when he was very young. He was just a small boy when he and Rafaela escaped that fire, but it was only a few years after that that he began to transform into a ghoul. Which means that yes, he is over 200 years old, but shouldn't his age kind of be locked in at the point where he started to transform into a ghoul? Which makes me wonder if he really is dealing from age-related diseases like arthritis and joint pain, or if a lot of this is in his head, and he's just really hard on himself due to all of his perceived failures. In the case of a ghoul who is for all intents and purposes immortal, they're not afflicted by age in the same way most people are. Unless they became a ghoul at an older age, there's no visible manifestation of their age. We only know how old they are by asking them. But the issues Raul struggles with are real-world issues that people have to deal with as they age every day. Some people deal with it by trying to relive their youth. They hit a certain age where they feel that spark has gone, and suddenly they have a midlife crisis. This kind of attitude, I think, is something that Raul criticizes. Time and again, he expresses sympathy for people who embrace their limitations, instead of trying to do something that they physically can't, instead of trying to pretend to be somebody who they may have been in the past, but they aren't anymore, and they never again will be. Doing so kind of puts you in a state of self-delusion, where one fools himself into thinking that he's something that he's not. All of that said, I think Raul was surprised when he saw so many elderly people in the Mojave Wasteland still being useful. Loyal is still an essential part of the boomer community. He's the guy who keeps the solar array up so that the community has power. Corporal Sterling may not be a ranger anymore, but he accepted his physical limitations and instead tried something else. He's still got a good eye, he's still got a great trigger finger, and so he joined the 1st Recon, where he can still kill fiends, he can still kill the Legion, he's just doing it in a different way. He probably would have failed if he insisted on being a ranger, but because he embraced his limitations, he was able to forge a brand new career for himself, a career where he is an essential part of 1st Recon. But poor old Ranger Andy is still living in the past. He sits in Novak pretending to be the ranger that he used to be. He even calls up some of his ranger buddies to chat with them, to look out for them, to see if they're okay. But as he says in his dialogue, most days he just lies on his bed, staring at the ceiling, day in and day out. Ranger Andy is an example of a guy who hasn't fully accepted his new reality, and until he accepts that, he can't come up with a new direction for his life, and so he sits in his room and stagnates. So what's the best choice for our good friend Raul? This was a difficult one for me. On one hand, I really like the full maintenance perk. Having my armor and weapon condition degrade 75% more slowly is amazing. It's gonna save me a lot of money. But his new outfit is less than impressive. It's okay. It's very Raul, but it's not nearly as glamorous as his Vaquero outfit. The old Vaquero perk that he gets, being 33% faster with revolvers and lever-action rifles, is okay. So if I was making this decision just on the perks, I'd probably choose the full maintenance perk. But his Vaquero costume more than makes up for it. If I have to think about this from the perspective of what's going to entertain me the most, by having this guy run with me as a companion every day, then I would totally pick the old Vaquero perk, just because I love seeing him run around in a sombrero. But here I am being selfish. These are all about me. What about Raul? What's the best decision for him? Well, I think both can be really good for him depending upon how we go about it. If we're abusive towards this guy and we put him down every step of the way, and if we're rude, and if we're heartless, and if we don't know mercy, then we kind of bully poor Raul into embracing his mechanic life, but he does so with low self-esteem. And I bet that in his heart, there's a part of him that always wonders if he could be doing more with his pistol. But I do think that there's a healthy way for Raul to stay a mechanic. If instead of being bullied into it, we allow him to observe Loyal, a man who doesn't serve his community with a gun, on his own he comes to the realization that you don't always have to use a gun to fight the enemy. This is something we learned from Three Dog in Fallout 3. Three Dog fought the good fight with his words, with a microphone. Raul could fight the good fight with his wrench, by keeping his friend's equipment in tip-top shape, by supporting those like the NCR who actively fight the fiends. Once he realizes that he can be just as useful and do just as much good with a wrench, then I think choosing the maintenance path is going to be perfectly healthy for this guy. The other option, the old Vaquero option, I think is also healthy for him, because it's not about vengeance. If this was just about vengeance, if this was just about Raul going out and getting revenge on raiders for what they did to Rafaela, then that I think would be a bit of an issue. But from everything that I gather from the dialogue options that we have, Raul was more upset with his failures. Up until the moment that he met the courier, he had been unable to be successful with his pistols. But that doesn't mean that he can't become successful with them. That doesn't mean he can't use his pistols to save more helpless men and women, to save more children, to help those less fortunate than himself. So I think both options are pretty great. And ultimately it comes down to what you want out of your game. For me, I really enjoyed the full maintenance perk, but I couldn't turn down the old Vaquero outfit. That sombrero is just amazing. Now this choice with Raul does affect the end of the game. If we kill Raul, he gets this ending.
After a long and eventful life, Raul's luck finally ran out during his time with the courier.
If we free him from Black Mountain, but we never acquire him as a companion, and we don't complete his personal quest, we get this ending.
Still grappling with self-doubt over his usefulness in the face of old age, Raul was never able to find peace with himself. Eventually, he left the Mojave and assumed a new name, as he had done so many times before.
If we convince him that his time as a gunslinger has passed, he gets this ending.
Convinced that his time as a gunslinger was past, Raul made peace with the idea of growing old. After traveling with the courier for a time, he retired and settled down in Outer Vegas, where he would spend his days fixing ancient machinery.
And if we convince him to take up his pistols and to become a vaquero again, he gets this ending.
Invigorated by his travels with the courier, Raul once more took up his guns in memory of his lost Rafaela. Soon after, the Mojave was filled with tales of the ghost vaquero who hunts down those who prey on the weak.
And that is the full story of Raul Tejada, another man with another tragic story in the Mojave wasteland, and yet another reminder about just how horrible the apocalypse was. But from the ashes of his terrible personal story can rise something beautiful, a man who takes pity on the weak and helps them in the best way he can. What are your thoughts on Raul? Which option did you choose? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I publish a new Fallout video 6 days a week on a wide range of Fallout topics spanning all of the games. So if you don't want to miss my next video, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning bright and early with a brand new video.